Most people glance at the toilet bowl, notice something slightly off, and decide it probably means nothing. A little foam in the water, maybe the toilet cleaner, maybe they flush too fast. They walk away and don't think about it again. Here's what I want you to understand before we go any further. That foam is not a random occurrence. It is not a plumbing quirk. When your urine is persistently foamy, not occasionally, not when the stream hits the water at an angle, but consistently, every time, your kidneys are trying to communicate something specific. And what they're saying is this: protein is leaking where it shouldn't be. Protein belongs in your blood. It does not belong in your urine. Your kidneys are extraordinarily sophisticated organs. Each one contains roughly 1 million tiny filtering units called nephrons. And each nephron has a pressure-driven membrane designed to pass waste through while holding large molecules like protein back. Think of it like a coffee filter that's been engineered over millions of years of evolution, specifically to keep the good stuff in. When protein starts appearing in the urine, it means those membranes have been breached. And the foam you see, that persistent dish soap-like froth, is simply protein acting as a surfactant on the water's surface. That is the biology of the bubble, and it matters far more than most people realize. The clinical term is proteinuria, protein in the urine, and it is one of the earliest measurable signs of kidney dysfunction. The filtering membranes I mentioned, called glomeruli, are not simply passive sieves. They are electrically charged, pressure-sensitive structures that actively repel large molecules. When they become inflamed through chronic high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, oxidative stress, or a combination of all three, that charge is disrupted, and that selectivity starts to break down. And here's what's actually happening once the damage begins. It doesn't just leak protein into the urine. Those protein molecules, now present in the kidney tubules where they don't belong, trigger a secondary inflammatory cascade. The tubular cells that line the collecting ducts respond to the presence of albumin, the most abundant protein in your blood, as though it's a foreign invader. They release cytokines, they activate fibrotic pathways, and they accelerate the very damage that caused the leak in the first place. This is the vicious cycle that makes early kidney damage so dangerous. The symptom becomes a driver. What I've seen clinically is that people often arrive in the emergency department with significantly reduced kidney function, sometimes already in stage 3 or 4 chronic kidney disease, having had foamy urine for years. They noticed it. They ignored it. By the time it became undeniable, they were facing dialysis conversations. I don't say that to frighten you. I say it because the intervention window, the period during which damage can be slowed and in some cases partially reversed, is wide open at the early stage. And what you drink, specifically and consistently, is one of the most direct levers you have. I'm Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician. And after nearly a decade working in the A&E, I've seen what kidney failure looks like when it arrives as a crisis, which is almost always too late. So my goal with this channel is to give people the information they needed years before the crisis, so they never have to end up where my patients do. Let's get into it. And just really quickly, if you're getting value from this video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. It genuinely helps these videos reach more people like you, and that's the whole point of this. The phrase kidney toxins gets thrown around a lot in wellness content, and it's often used vaguely enough that it stops meaning anything. So let me be specific, because the specificity is what makes this useful. Your kidneys filter roughly 180 liters of blood every single day. In doing so, they identify and excrete a range of metabolic waste compounds, substances your body generates as the normal byproduct of biological activity. The primary ones are urea, which is produced when your liver breaks down amino acids from protein; creatinine, which is generated by your muscles as they contract and release energy; and uric acid, which is the end product of purine metabolism, purines being compounds found in meat, seafood, alcohol, and high fructose foods. These compounds are harmless at normal concentrations and become progressively problematic as they accumulate. Elevated urea is associated with neurological symptoms, confusion, fatigue, nausea. Elevated creatinine is the clinical marker your doctor uses to estimate how well your kidneys are actually filtering. And elevated uric acid is not only the driver of gout, the intensely painful joint condition, but has been independently linked in journals including Kidney International to endothelial dysfunction and accelerated kidney disease progression. There is also a fourth category that receives far less attention in mainstream health conversations, a group of compounds called uremic toxins, substances like indoxyl sulfate and p-cresyl sulfate, which are produced by gut bacteria when they ferment certain amino acids. These compounds are particularly difficult for damaged kidneys to clear. They accumulate in the bloodstream, and they appear to directly injure the very glomerular cells responsible for filtration. Research published in the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology has characterized them as among the most damaging contributors to progressive kidney decline. Understanding what you're actually trying to clear and why changes how you approach what you drink, because different compounds are cleared by different mechanisms, and not all of them respond to water alone. The standard advice for kidney health is simple: drink more water. And it is not wrong. Adequate hydration is genuinely foundational. Without sufficient fluid volume, your kidneys cannot produce enough urine to clear the compounds accumulating in your blood. And the concentration of waste in your tubules rises to the point where it can precipitate as crystals and cause structural damage. But here's what the just drink more water advice misses. Uric acid clearance is not purely a volume problem. It's a pH problem. Uric acid is significantly more soluble in an alkaline environment and significantly more likely to crystallize in an acidic one. Drinking more water at the wrong urinary pH simply moves acidic urine in greater quantity without changing the solubility of the compound you're trying to shift. Similarly, the uremic toxins I mentioned, indoxyl sulfate, p-cresyl sulfate, are protein-bound in the bloodstream. They do not filter freely through the glomerulus the way creatinine does. They require active tubular secretion, a process that depends on specific transporters. And optimizing that process is not simply a matter of volume. What this means practically is that the type of fluid you consume, and not just the quantity, has a measurable effect on what your kidneys can clear and how efficiently they can clear it. And that's where this conversation becomes genuinely useful. The drinks that actually support kidney filtration: water, but structured, not random. Water is still the foundation, and I want to be precise about why and how to make it work harder. The kidneys function most efficiently when plasma osmolality, which is the concentration of particles in your blood, remains within a fairly narrow range. When you're even mildly dehydrated, plasma osmolality rises, and the pituitary gland releases antidiuretic hormone, ADH, which signals the kidneys to reabsorb water rather than excrete it. The urine becomes concentrated, waste compounds rise in tubular concentration, and the risk of both crystal formation and tubular injury increases substantially. The clinical evidence suggests that optimal kidney clearance is associated with producing somewhere between 2 to 2.5 liters of urine per day, which in most adults requires consuming roughly 2.5 to 3 liters of fluid from all sources. But the timing matters as much as the total. Drinking the bulk of your fluid early in the day and through the afternoon maintains glomerular filtration rate, the key measure of kidney function, during your most metabolically active hours. Waiting until evening and drinking large quantities before bed creates a circadian mismatch. Your kidneys downregulate filtration activity overnight as part of normal circadian biology. So the fluid is less effectively used for clearance and more likely to disturb your sleep. Start the morning with 400 to 500 milliliters of water before coffee, before food, and before screens. This addresses the mild dehydration that accumulates overnight and restores filtration rate before the day's metabolic demands begin to generate waste. Drink 2, lemon water, the citrate mechanism. Fresh lemon juice in water is not simply a wellness trend. It has a specific and well-characterized mechanism that is directly relevant to kidney health. Lemon juice is one of the richest dietary sources of citric acid, and when citric acid is metabolized in the body, it produces citrate. Urinary citrate is a powerful inhibitor of kidney stone formation, specifically because it binds to calcium in the urine and prevents it from crystallizing with oxalate or phosphate into the solid deposits that form stones. Research published in the Journal of Urology demonstrated that lemon juice supplementation raised urinary citrate levels by a clinically meaningful degree in stone-forming patients, an effect comparable in some analyses to potassium citrate supplementation, which is the pharmacological standard of care. Beyond stone prevention, the alkalinizing effect of citrate metabolism raises urinary pH, which, as I mentioned earlier, significantly increases the solubility of uric acid and reduces its tendency to precipitate in the collecting ducts. Half a lemon squeezed into 300 milliliters of water, consumed with your first or second glass of the morning, is a small habit with a disproportionately large effect on the chemical environment your kidneys are working in. Drink 3, hibiscus tea, the ACE inhibitor analogy. This one surprises people, and for good reason. Hibiscus tea, made from the dried calyces of Hibiscus sabdurifa, contains a class of polyphenols called anthocyanins, which are the same compounds responsible for the deep red pigmentation in blueberries, red cabbage, and pomegranates. In the kidneys, these anthocyanins do something particularly valuable. They reduce oxidative stress specifically within glomerular tissue, which is the precise location where filtration membrane damage originates. But the effect that has generated the most clinical interest is the blood pressure mechanism. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Hypertension, encompassing multiple randomized controlled trials, found that hibiscus tea consumption produced a statistically significant reduction in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, with an average systolic reduction of approximately 7 millimeters of mercury. The proposed mechanism involves anthocyanin inhibition of angiotensin-converting enzyme, the same enzyme that ACE inhibitor medications like ramipril target. When ACE activity is reduced, the angiotensin II pathway is dampened, peripheral vascular resistance falls, and glomerular filtration pressure decreases. This matters enormously because one of the primary drivers of progressive proteinuria is hypertensive damage to the glomerular capillaries, the high-pressure injury that eventually breaches those filtering membranes. Think of hibiscus tea as a mild pressure regulation tool for the very capillaries that determine whether protein stays in your blood or ends up in your urine. 1 to 2 cups daily, prepared as a cold steep or a warm brew from dried hibiscus flowers, delivers a meaningful anthocyanin load. It should not replace antihypertensive medication in anyone whose blood pressure requires pharmacological management. But as a complementary dietary strategy, the clinical evidence is genuinely compelling. Drink 4, dandelion leaf tea, diuretic without the depletion. Dandelion, specifically the leaf preparation, not the root, has a traditional history as a diuretic, and the pharmacological basis for that effect has now been characterized in human trials. Research published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine demonstrated that dandelion leaf extract produced a significant and measurable increase in urinary frequency and volume following a single dose, a diuretic response comparable to some pharmaceutical agents. What distinguishes dandelion from synthetic diuretics like furosemide is the potassium profile. Conventional diuretics promote sodium excretion at the expense of potassium, which creates electrolyte imbalances that can paradoxically worsen cardiovascular risk and renal stress. Dandelion leaf contains substantial quantities of potassium naturally, meaning that the urinary potassium losses associated with increased urine output are partially offset by what the tea itself provides. This is not a trivial distinction. Potassium depletion is one of the reasons long-term diuretic therapy requires careful monitoring. For kidney support specifically, a gentle increase in urine output, particularly during periods when creatinine or uric acid is known to be elevated, enhances the clearance of soluble waste compounds and reduces tubular concentration of potentially crystallizing substances. 1 cup of dandelion leaf tea in the mid-afternoon offers this effect without the electrolyte concerns that accompany stronger diuretic approaches. Drink 5. Barley water, the uric acid connection. Barley water is perhaps the least fashionable entry on this list, but the mechanism behind it is solid enough that it deserves proper attention. Pearl barley, when steeped in water, releases beta-glucan, the same soluble fiber that gives oats their cholesterol-lowering properties. In the context of kidney health, beta-glucan has 2 relevant effects. First, it slows glucose absorption from the gut, which dampens post-meal insulin spikes. And because chronically elevated insulin promotes renal sodium retention and increases glomerular filtration pressure, even modest improvements in post-meal glucose handling reduce one of the primary mechanical stressors on kidney tissue. Second, and more specifically for the foamy urine picture, traditional consumption of barley water has been associated in observational data with reductions in serum uric acid levels. The proposed mechanism involves barley's alkalinizing residue and its effect on uric acid solubility in the renal tubules. A study published in the Journal of Renal Nutrition examining dietary fiber and uric acid clearance found that increased soluble fiber intake was independently associated with improved uric acid excretion, an effect partially attributable to altered gut microbiome composition and reduced intestinal purine reabsorption. Barley water is simple to prepare. Simmer 50 grams of pearl barley in 1 liter of water for 30 minutes. Strain and consume at room temperature. Add a small amount of lemon juice and you combine the citrate benefit with the barley mechanism in a single preparation. What to remove from your glass? There's a problem with focusing only on what to add without addressing what's actively working against you. And some of the beverages that are undermining your kidneys most consistently are ones that most people consider either harmless or even healthy. High fructose fruit juices, even the ones marketed as natural or cold-pressed, deliver a fructose load that the liver processes along a pathway distinctly different from glucose. Fructose metabolism in the liver bypasses the normal regulatory enzyme phosphofructokinase and proceeds rapidly to fat production. But it also generates uric acid as a direct byproduct through the degradation of purine nucleotides during the accelerated ATP consumption that fructose metabolism demands. This is not a minor detail. A high daily intake of fructose-rich juice can raise serum uric acid measurably within days, and chronically elevated uric acid is one of the most underappreciated drivers of both kidney damage and hypertension in the research literature. Energy drinks present a separate concern. The combination of high caffeine, synthetic B vitamins at doses that dwarf the recommended intake, and in many formulations, significant sugar content creates a metabolic burden that the kidneys must process while also managing the mild dehydrating effect of caffeine-induced diuresis. Several case reports in the Clinical Kidney Journal have documented acute kidney injury associated with excessive energy drink consumption, not just in people with pre-existing kidney disease, but in apparently healthy young adults. Excessive protein shakes are the third category worth addressing. High protein intake is not inherently harmful to healthy kidneys, but in someone already showing proteinuria, significantly elevating dietary protein intake increases the filtration burden on already compromised glomeruli. It raises glomerular filtration pressure and accelerates the mechanical wear on membranes that are already struggling. If you are consuming multiple high-protein shakes daily, and you've noticed persistent foam in your urine, reducing protein supplement intake is worth discussing with your physician before adding any other intervention. Bigger picture, brief bridge, what drinks can't do alone. I want to be straightforward with you about the limits of what I've described today. These drinks work. The mechanisms are real, the research is there, and the daily practice of structured, targeted hydration is genuinely meaningful for kidney function. But beverages are one pillar in a structure that also requires managing blood pressure, controlling post-meal blood glucose, reducing the dietary fructose and ultra-processed food load that drives uric acid and uremic toxin accumulation. And if you are already showing signs of kidney stress, having a proper conversation with your doctor that includes a dipstick urinalysis and a basic metabolic panel to check your creatinine and estimated GFR. Foamy urine that resolves after good hydration and dietary change is meaningful and encouraging. Foamy urine that persists despite those changes needs a clinical explanation. The drinks I've described today are supportive, not curative, and the distinction matters. Here is what I want you to take from this. The foam you see in the toilet is a biological signal, specific, mechanistically meaningful, and in the early stages, something you have considerable power to influence. Your kidneys are not passive filters. They are dynamic, responsive, hormone-sensitive organs that adapt to the chemical environment you create for them every single day through what you consume. Structured water intake that respects circadian filtration biology. Lemon water that raises citrate and shifts urinary pH toward the soluble end of the uric acid spectrum. Hibiscus tea that reduces the glomerular filtration pressure responsible for membrane breach. Dandelion leaf that gently increases clearance without electrolyte penalty. Barley water that addresses the uric acid and insulin pathways simultaneously. These are not wellness fads. They are interventions with mechanistic rationale, and in the case of hibiscus and citrate at least, meaningful clinical evidence behind them. From a longevity perspective, your kidneys are the silent arbiters of almost everything else that matters: cardiovascular health, blood pressure, metabolic function, even brain clarity. Every decade of life that passes with well-functioning kidneys is a decade of compounding advantage. Every year of early damage is a year of accelerating disadvantage. The gap between those two trajectories is often determined not by dramatic interventions, but by the small, consistent daily choices that most people never connect to kidney function at all. What you drink is one of those choices. And now you know precisely why it matters. If you found this video genuinely useful, please subscribe to the channel, and let's help as many people as possible avoid the diseases that fill emergency departments every single day. I'll see you in the next one.